New Zealand Parliament has changed a lot. We are the first country in the world to give women the vote. And in 1996, we changed our electoral system to give a voice to people who felt excluded from politics. The people on the margins, as they're sometimes called, although obviously they're not on the margins of their own lives. My guest today, Nandor Tanczos, has happily spent much of his life around the edges of society. And part of what it's taught him is how vulnerable life can be. But he's never been willing to see people's rights and the rights of the planet itself taken away from them. Instead, he's always looked for ways to see change. The kind of change that just might open up a more just world. In the end, that led him from the radical edge deep into the heart of his country's institutional life, the New Zealand Parliament. But did he really know what he was getting himself into?
I had a pretty good idea what MPs do, the long hours, the hard work, the loss of private life, particularly as a dreadlock Rastafarian. If I went into Parliament, I knew what that would mean.
You're going to be a media focus and all this stuff.
Feeding frenzy, you know. But in the end, I decided that I would stand because I felt it was important to have someone in Parliament who was outside of the box.
I, Nandor Tanczos, solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the people of Aotearoa.
Did you find that you had to sacrifice any of your idealism to be part of the parliamentary system, as it were?
There's different kinds of compromise. There's a compromise of your principles, and I don't feel like I ever had to do that. No. And then there's the recognition that while you might want to go there, actually the political reality is you can only go this far, but it's leading in the same direction. There were many of those kind of compromises.
Yeah. Do you think you made a difference being in Parliament?
I like to think so. I think that there's a number of initiatives that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't there.
Right.
So the clean slate legislation was legislation I introduced into Parliament. Right. To wipe minor convictions after 7 years without reoffending. I introduced the hemp bill to allow hemp to be grown in this country, which spurred the government to start regulations. Independent prison ombudsman was an initiative I negotiated with the government. But in a way, I think my most important contribution was the symbolic one. Right. Was actually to say that this can be a House of Representatives, to represent voices in Parliament, which I don't think had ever been represented there before.
Madam Speaker, one of the first things I did on entering Parliament was buy a watch. And since then, I have been shackled to the system. This arbitrary Roman calendar disconnects us from the natural rhythms of life and of the planet. And so today, I remove that shackle because when I look at the state of our rivers, our atmosphere and our people, I don't need a watch to tell me what time it is.
After 3 terms, enough?
I did think about whether I should stay longer, but I came to the conclusion that while there are opportunities to make change, the time had come for leadership in the community again. And in addition, the toll that Parliament was taking on my own spirit and soul was becoming too great.
So talk me through what a day in the life of a Rastafarian in Ngaruahia is like.
Well, it depends which day. I mean, get up in the morning and give thanks and praises for the day, give thanks for my life.
Ajar Rastafari, hear our prayers. I offer up these prayers in the name of the Holy Trinity of life, the Holy Father, the Divine Mother, the Sacred Child.
Prayers for those around us, for those who are sick or those in need, not just those we know, but those in darkness and those suffering for their righteousness, those in prison for their ignorance. We pray for all of those and the light of Jah to light up the hearts of all people, and also give thanks for food when we eat, because things die for us to live, and those who bring it to us and harvest it and whatever, cook it.
Yep, so waiho tēnā ki te taha?
This.
Yep.
Saturday is our Sabbath day.
How do you keep the Sabbath?
Well, it's a day for not working, so but spending time with the family. And ideally being conscious all days, but a day to be mindful particularly.
Since you've left Parliament, what work are you undertaking now?
I guess I've been struggling to identify where my peculiar shape fits in the jigsaw puzzle. I mean, specifically, I've started a business doing media work, writing, political analysis, commentary, and also media training with grassroots to teach people how to be more effective with the media, teaching people how to be effective in the political systems, because that's something I have experience of, working around sustainability issues, conflict resolution, consensus building, treaty education, all these, a range of different things really.
You talked about coming from an anarchist background. In fact, you came from quite a diverse background. Your parents from different sides of the world. Tell us about that.
Well, my father is Hungarian. He left in really 1957 at the end of the Hungarian uprising. He was actively involved in Budapest in the revolution, and eventually it became too dangerous for him to stay, and so he left, became a refugee, went to Austria and then England, where he met my mother, who's South African of Khoi and mixed ancestry, so what they used to call coloured under the apartheid regime. So they met in England. My brother and I were born there, came to Aotearoa when I was about 7. I remember we had family discussions and my brother and I were very keen to come to Aotearoa. We looked at the brochures, we saw the mountain tops and lakes and rivers, and very attracted by Māori culture that we saw in the brochures. My father said if we moved to New Zealand, we'll live in the south. We were going to live around Christchurch, and so we'd be near the mountains. We could go skiing. We'd have dogs and animals and horses, and it would be wonderful.
And it all happened just like that.
Not exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments we shall be landing at Christchurch International Airport.
When you came here, mid-70s, New Zealand was a different country.
It was like a colonial version of England, and that's not what I was expecting. I thought we would come here, we would have to speak Māori, because it's a Māori country. We would wear piu-piu, and we'd live in Raupo whare, and...
You set up life in this new place. Did you and your family keep in touch with Hungarian and South African roots?
When I was a teenager, when I was 14, my parents sent me to live in Hungary for a year. And of course at that time it was communist Hungary as well. So that was very different.
So did that sharpen your political awareness, do you think?
Very much so. And I think it was really the formative ideas around that led me to anarchism. Because what I saw in Hungary was the kind of state control. What I saw in Aotearoa and places like England was corporate control, increasingly. And so what I came to was a critique of both, I guess.
Yeah.
And then as a family we moved back to England when I finished school.
Right.
On the way we went through South Africa. My cousin was getting married. It was the first time my mother had been back since I think she was 18.
Gosh.
And it was the first time for me that I understood that I was South African as well as Hungarian. And there I experienced going out with my cousins and, oh, it's a hot day, let's go to the beach. No, we can't go to that beach. That's a whites-only beach. So it's the first time I really experienced and was affected by the restrictions on non-whites. And that was quite powerful. We went to my cousin's wedding, returned to England. I enrolled with the National Council for the Training of Journalists.
Right.
Studied journalism for a year. Was deeply dissatisfied with the experience. Realised journalism was, by and large, shallow, trite pap.
Right. That's not to mince words.
I had the realisation, and it stayed with me ever since, that the job of a journalist is not to write news, it's to deliver readers to advertisers.
Right.
And once you understand that that's really who pays the piper, everything else falls into place. In England, there's many layers of censorship, more than we have here, and New Zealand media is, I think, heavily censored. Then I became involved in the peace movement. Moved into a flat where my landlady was the local coordinator for the Darlington Peace Action Group, and from there got heavily involved in the peace camp at Molesworth, RAF Molesworth, when they evicted the people who'd been occupying the base.
Right, so this was actually a time of real foment in Britain, wasn't it? The miners' strike had been going on.
That's right, yeah.
And there were huge demonstrations, anti-nuclear demonstrations at Greenham, at Molesworth.
I mean, Margaret Thatcher had split the country. She had a majority, but was so aggressive towards people who were not her supporters, essentially, that I think she'd really divided the country in a new way. I was in Darlington in the north of England, in County Durham, during the miners' strike, as you say, and saw firsthand the heavy brutality of the English police against the miners. I actually was involved in miner support. We were collecting money for miners, organising convoys of supplies which were turned back by the police who blockaded miners' villages. The Stonehenge Festival had been going on for 12 years. It was due to get a royal charter or some kind of common law recognition, so it would become a permanent feature. And I'd been to the Stonehenge in '84, the year before, and had been amazed at the event. A city of 100,000 people, self-organised, a free festival, no entry ticket.
Right.
It was free. People were giving away food. There was all kinds of things where people would collect stuff in, clothes, and then just give it away. Something I'd never seen before.
So kind of a celebration of alternative community almost.
Yeah, that's right. And a police no-go area, interestingly, which was very threatening to the authorities. Yeah. The police had put an injunction against Stonehenge to stop it happening again, and they were going down. So me and my girlfriend got ourselves a VW combi and loaded up with some friends and joined the convoy. I don't know, maybe 100 vehicles or something, buses and living vehicles. Very carnival-like atmosphere. We were served with an injunction. We were stopped and served with injunctions on the way. We thought, oh, well, whatever. On our way to Stonehenge, they'd put a big gravel pit, pile, I should say, on the road to divert us down a side road. I was sitting in my van, and the first thing I knew, I thought we just stopped. Someone had broken down or something. Police came out from the vehicles around in front of me, ran up to the windscreen and started trying to smash it. I couldn't put it through. So one came around to my side, put through the side window, grabbed me and pulled me out of the vehicle. Other people were cutting down the fence and driving their buses into a beanfield next door, which became known as the Battle of the Beanfield. And many people were quite brutally beaten by police in the course of those events. I was arrested fairly early on, taken to the selves and held there for a couple of days, I think, and then released. Ended up parking up in Wales with people who I later found out were called the God Squad.
So why the God Squad?
They were deeply spiritual people. I don't know that they were Christian as such. I don't remember people calling ourselves Christians. We read the Bible a lot. We spent a lot of time in meditation and prayer, pursuing things of the spirit.
What did you make of the Bible? Did it affect you in any particular way?
It spoke to me.
Yeah.
For the first time, it spoke to me as a living book. Right. And for me, really, I was reborn in that time. I was reborn.
What do you mean when you say that?
It's hard to describe what that means. I don't know that I mean the same as when people say they're born again in Christ.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think I mean the same. I'm not, but I don't know what that experience is. But when I look back at that time, it was like a rebirth into a new being. Yeah.
But you left the God Squad.
I received a call to leave.
So how did that manifest itself?
As an inner voice. I was in the forest, and an inner voice spoke to me very clearly and said, "Go. It's time to go." When I eventually got to my family, they were coming back to Aotearoa. I think they'd been trying to find me and had been unable to.
You'd been lost in the woods for a couple of years.
Yeah. And so they, and I'm blessed that they helped me to come back to Aotearoa. After I moved to Hamilton, I ended up running a reggae show on student radio. because I was listening to reggae music and growing dreadlocks, reading the Bible still, vegetarian, all those things. And one of my friends said to me, "Oh, you're a Rastafarian." And I thought, I don't know. I don't even know what Rastafari really is. And the more I found out about Rastafari philosophy, the more I realised it did describe who I was. It was, when I looked at my life through the lens of Rasta, it made sense of my life in a way I hadn't been able to before.
So what is Rastafari?
It's a modern expression of the Nazaritic tradition that you read about in the book of Leviticus and the like. So Samson, as an example of someone consecrated as a Nazarite from birth by his mother. The vows of the Nazarite are threefold. We don't cut our hair, hence dreadlocks,
Right.
and beards, for men, of course. We don't touch dead bodies, and we don't drink alcohol or strong drink. It really began in the Caribbean islands among the descendants of kidnapped slaves. And you have to understand slavery to understand Rasta. Some people estimate up to 60 million people kidnapped from West Africa and taken to the Americas as slaves. Taken there because the indigenous people were exterminated because they wouldn't work the silver mines of Christopher Columbus and his friends. So instead they imported African slaves from West Africa. Maybe a third of them died in transit. When they got there in Jamaica, the life expectancy of a slave was about 10 years, they say. And there's recorded discussions among slave owners as to whether it was cheaper to treat their slaves well, so they lasted longer, or just use them up quickly and buy new ones. Mm-hmm. So the message of Rasta among those people was, look, to the Emperor Crown in Ethiopia in 1930, with a born name Rastafari Makonnen, crowned anointed king by the Abuna of Addis Ababa, Haile Selassie, the might and power of the Trinity, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. Now that name is prophesied in the book of Revelation. Rastafari Makonnen can trace his lineage from the union of King Solomon and Makeda, the Queen of Sheba, 225th in line to the throne of David. So the throne of David, the throne of Israel, that all the crowned monarchs of Europe draw their authority from, because they got those crowns because they were given them by the Pope in the name of Jesus Christ, the one who sits on that throne is a black African king, Haile Selassie.
Right. Is that saying that Haile Selassie is the Messiah?
Yes. The anointed king
one.
of Israel.
Right.
That's right.
And does that mean that Haile Selassie is also divine?
I think an orthodox Rastafarian view would be that Haile Selassie is God the Creator.
Right.
I think that that's a misunderstanding, in the same way I think that many Christians misunderstand Jesus Christus as God the Son.
Right.
We are all God, the children of God. We are all sparks of the divine. But what does the word Messiah, or its Greek translation Christ, actually mean? What it means is the anointed king, the prophet king of Israel. To me, that's the importance, that these people are men, human beings with a historical function and an inspiration to I and I to follow.
I give thanks for this world that I know I've been given to inhabit, this paradise, this Garden of Eden. I give thanks for this day of blessings, of challenges, of struggles, of learnings, and of joy. I give thanks, O Jah, for these things.
You used the expression I and I before. What's that about?
It comes from the name of the creator, of Jah. In the Bible, when Moses was given his mission to lead the people of Israel out of slavery and into freedom, he said, "Who shall I say has sent me? Because the people won't believe God has sent me if I don't give them a name." And Jah says to Moses, "I have no name. I am unnameable." Because how can you name the infinite? And Moses says, "But I need a name because they'll just never believe me. They'll think I'm making it up." And I'm paraphrasing here.
Sure.
And And the message he gets is, okay, for your weakness of understanding and the weakness of the understanding of your people, I'll give you a name. That name is I am. And that tells us something about the fundamental nature of Jah, I think. So when we say I and I, it's about the I, the perceiving I, the conscious I, the experiencing I that is within the heart of all life. It's the livity of Rasta, the living way of Rasta, that is what makes I and I distinct. So, for example, a fundamental thing is naturality. We seek to live as natural a life as possible in the mould that the Creator formed us in. So this means how we eat is to eat as natural food as possible, unprocessed. How we travel is to prefer as natural a means of travel, walking or cycling or maybe a bus or a train. I fly a plane when I have to. Well, I don't fly a plane, but I fly in a plane when I have to. So you have to do as the need arises, but essentially the orientation is towards a natural way of living as far as possible. So first of all, it means stripping away all the social expectations about, look a certain way, dress a certain way, you got to have all this stuff to be happy, you need all these things, you can't smell like a human, you got to put this stuff on so you smell different, and you've got to do these things so you look different. It does away with all that. Dreadlocks, as an example, is natural hair.
Just
throw the brush away. And your hair goes knotty, then it goes natty, and then it goes dready. And that's why we call it dreadlocks, because for the capitalist Babylonian society, that strikes dread into the heart of it, because it's a rejection of consumerism, that you've got this big empty hole that you need to fill with stuff. The best way to be satisfied is to be yourself, to be your natural self. And what does that mean? Well, it means being natural. It means looking after the planet that we're part of. Because anything else is an insult to the Creator. If my father went away and I trashed the house, smashed the windows and went to the toilet in the pantry, what would my father say when he came home? So it's disrespectful the way we treat the creation, this Garden of Eden we've been given to inhabit.
You talked about Babylon before. That's clearly kind of a mythic expression. Unpack that for us.
Babylon is this empire which loves money more than it loves life. Babylon and Rome and now Imperial America. It's the same empire coming back, and even the symbols of it are the same.
Right. So when you use the expression, you might be talking about the empire, but you're using it metaphorically to talk about any kind of system that is disempowering of human life.
Yeah. So Babylon lives within us all.
Right.
I can't deny, that stuff is in I as well. And so it's an internal thing, but it's the systems that we are part of. It's the systems of power that keep people alienated from their natural selves and from the world around them, keep us alienated from each other.
Something the media loves to focus on is the whole question of cannabis use. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's a sacrament of the Rastafari faith. So we say that our bodies are the temple of Jah, and we burn holy incense in the temple. It's a herb that's mentioned throughout the Bible, but often the word translated as sometimes as calamus, or as a sweet reed or an aromatic herb.
I'll give it. No, Penny.
They talk about a herb of renown that will be raised up in the last time, and a tree for the healing of the nations. And when we look at the many medicinal benefits of cannabis, we look at the eating of the seed as one of the most complete sources of protein and essential amino acids and fatty acids. The industrial uses for the most durable natural fibre, building materials, paper, the many thousands of uses that traditionally hemp has been used for until it was being suppressed by the petrochemical industry.
But obviously use of cannabis in New Zealand is technically illegal. That poses no issues for you?
Well, I don't believe that there is a person on this planet who's got the right to tell I then I cannot use the sacred herb in the manner in which I choose.
So it's a question of integrity and principle.
There's just no power that, there's no authority that has that authority. Just as I give you every seed-bearing herb to use. Now, no one can tell me that that's not the case.
Genesis is in your favour. Does Rastafari have any time for the notion of the Trinity?
The Trinity is something I've meditated on and contemplated a lot, because I have found it difficult to understand how all is one, and yet what is this Trinity? What is this three? And it came to me that really there is a Trinity. If you look at the pattern of life, there is a natural Trinity. It's the father, the mother, and the child. You know, the masculine and the feminine element is repeated all through our world. And then in joining together in love, the expression of that love is the child. And to me, that makes sense. That's a beautiful thing. But we have to reassert the divine feminine alongside the divine masculine. The mother and the father, equal partners. Yeah, and it's there in the Bible. God created people in the image of God, male and female. Ngahuia is Māori, and she follows Māori traditional practice. She has a particular interest in atua wahine, the Māori feminine elements. And our daughter is going to have to deal with her own reasoning, how she makes sense of our different traditions. But it's an interesting marriage because she's a follower of the divine feminine. And essentially Rasta comes out of a masculine tradition. And so we see our marriage as mirroring in our lives the greater marriage of the male and the female.
And that makes for good discussion and for...
Yeah, and interesting tensions at times, as you'd expect, but a great deal of mutual respect. And I think it's important that we find ways to work through these things, because as I say, I believe now is the time we have to reassert the divine feminine. And if we can't do that in our lives, then how can our society do that? And for those of us who come out of patriarchal traditions, that means that some of the things that we've held on to, we're going to have to give way on. And that's a painful process, but an important one. I think we have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Given what you were saying before about discerning whether people's spirits share the same goals and values, obviously that's more important than sharing any particular faith.
I think so. I mean, I know Rastafarian people who I don't trust. They call themselves Rastafarians. But their heart is not right. I know people, Buddhists, atheists, who I think have huge integrity and I can work alongside with. So at the end of the day, it's not what someone calls themselves, to my eyes, that's important. It's their heart and their mind and their path. Yeah.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.